So this is not intended to criticize in any way, but rather to inform. I was vegetarian for years before, and I had no idea that by still supporting the egg and dairy industries that I was still supporting so much animal cruelty. And basically this is what I wish that I had been told. I actually now believe that the dairy industry is in fact more cruel than the meat. Yeah, more cruel. And that is because these cows do not produce milk all the time. They don't produce this milk for us. Cows, just like all other mammals, only produce milk when they're pregnant and they have a baby. So these cows are artificially and forcibly impregnated, usually with bull sperm on a metal rod. And they put them on these metal racks, which the industry themselves actually call the rape rack. And the way they get this sperm is by essentially like jacking off the bull. So there's actually usually no integration of the male and female cows. And usually only days after the baby is born, but it can be hours, the baby is taken from its mother because, hey, the milk is for us, not the baby. And their mother and the baby will often cry and mourn for each other. So if they're male, they're usually sold to the veal industry because, hey, they have no use now, they have no commercial value because they can't make milk. And actually the only reason that the veal industry exists is because of the dairy industry. And if the baby is a female, they will often be raised to have the same fate as their mother, just to be a milking machine and impregnated again and again until they're also of no use. So the mother is usually then hooked up to painful milking machines, and in a lot of big factory farms, often in really horrible, like disgusting conditions, sometimes not even able to move around. They get infections. It's just really horrible. So this process of being forcibly impregnated, their baby's stolen, being milked, continues until their body is essentially worn out, which doesn't take very long. And then when they are no longer commercially valuable, they are sold to the beef industry. So basically, I think the dairy industry is a lot crueler because these cows have to live out this horrible life, and then they end up just in the same place as where the beef cows end up, in the slaughterhouse. So if you buy dairy, that's what you are supporting. There is no such thing as a happy dairy farm. What about eggs? Well, have you ever asked yourself where all the males are? When you have a baby, there's a 50% chance of it being male or female. But males are not, they're of no use to the egg industry because they can't lay eggs, obviously. So it is standard practice, no, not rare, standard practice for them to be ground up alive, only days old, or they're thrown on top of, into large bags on top of each other, alive, and they suffocate to death, or they are gassed. If you buy eggs, no matter if they're caged, organic, free range, you are supporting the death of baby chicks that are only days old. Lots of people would agree that the life of a caged hen is never good. Confined to tiny spaces, often crammed in with other hens. Some of them never see outdoors, or they can't even turn around. But free range, like, you're doing the right thing, aren't you? Well, in Australia at least, the laws and regulations on free range are very vague. It means there must be access to outdoors, but whether or not you can actually get access is a different story. It can mean cramming as many hens as you can into a really small space, like a shed, and there can be a tiny door on the side of the shed, that you might not ever be able to actually get to and isn't actually always open. But even if you're in a beautiful field of greenery, what's the point in being free range if you can't even move anyway? A lot of these hens have been genetically modified so they can't even stand, let alone move around. And where do you think they will go once they are no longer producing enough eggs? They're no longer profitable. Yep, you guessed it, they'll go to the same slaughterhouse, if they even survive that long. Chickens are actually only supposed to lay about 10 to 15 eggs per year because, let's face it, the releasing of an egg is part of the ovarian cycle. So you could call chicken eggs periods or hen periods. But they've been genetically modified to lay, in a lot of cases, multiple eggs per day. So this is an extremely taxing process on their body. They lose a lot of nutrients and it takes a lot of energy. And if we actually weren't taking these eggs away, the hens would be eating these eggs again. So every time that you take an egg away, the hen will lay a new one, which otherwise they would have consumed themselves. So yeah, even backyard chickens, it's still cruel. And what about leather? That used to be something I was also really confused about. Like, the whole idea of wearing an animal skin always kind of grossed me out and didn't really sit with me well. But I used to think, at least they're using every part of the animal, like they're not wasting it. But that's not even true. They're separate industries. They kill separate animals for fashion and for food. But there can't be anything wrong with honey, right? Well, wrong again. Do you know how many kilometers these bees have to fly? How many flowers they have to visit? Just to make the tiniest amount of honey. And that honey, they actually make it for themselves. They make it to sustain themselves in those colder months when there aren't as many flowers blooming, when they can't collect as much pollen. So these bees actually eat that honey themselves. And the way I like to think about it is kind of similar to like squirrels with their acorns. Like, they gather them all up and then they have it for the colder months. So that honey is for them, not for us. So when we take it away, they have to work so much harder. And also in a lot of commercial, like big bee farms, they're sprayed and so many of them are just killed unnecessarily. I hope that this was somewhat informative, and if you've never heard this before, it can be quite shocking because we are lied to by these industries and given this fake idea of these happy animals on these happy farms when that's not really reality. Most people, when they buy dairy or egg, wouldn't think that they're supporting like animal cruelty and the death of animals. And it is not your fault that you didn't know this, but now that you do, it is your responsibility to act. All the